All right, thanks for joining everybody. I'm gonna go through some slides here. Actually, no, I don't have an agenda. So I'm gonna run through some slides. Jonathan and I are gonna tag team a little bit. We work closely together. Jonathan's the head PM for Unity Catalog, and I'm the CTO at Immuta. So a lot of what we're talking about today is our work together to jointly release features in lockstep with one another. So we are in the middle of a paradigm shift, and what I mean by that is the way that we've historically done access control just doesn't work anymore. And there's really three key factors to this that are really, it's causing a lot of burden on our data platform teams to have to manage access control. And part of that is there's just more policies, right? There's a lot of privacy regulations that have come about over the last few years, and this requires granularity beyond table-level controls. The other piece of this is because of those privacy regulations, or in part by those privacy regulations, your data subjects, or the folks that you're collecting data on, are more aware of how their data is being used, and you need to establish that trust with those the folks that are contributing their data to your products. And then, of course, there's also complex paradigms associated with these privacy controls, such as purpose. And what I mean by that is it's not just who the user is, but what they're actually doing should gain them or lose them access to data. And then some of you have probably heard about data mesh, where you create, or teams create data products and share those data products. What that means in an access control world is now you have distributed stewardship of those data products, and you need to account for that and have a consistent way to manage policy. The middle one's obvious. I mean, that's been around for a little while now, but more and more data to deal with. And then, of course, the last one, which I think is a little bit forgotten, but a big factor, is that we have more users that want raw access to data. And what I mean by that is there's not a user interface where they're clicking buttons and getting answers. They want to be able to actually get in the data, into Spark, run queries against the raw data. And those three combined, again, make it very hard for our data platform teams to manage access control today. So we really need to modernize how we do this. So diving a little bit deeper, these are, we tried to categorize these into two separate challenges that you should think about. I would argue the management challenges are ones that you don't necessarily realize right away, but they quickly become a problem for your organization. And these are things like understanding where your data exists and catalog those changes. And then digging into that data and understanding where sensitive data lies there. And it's not only about your data and tagging up your data, but also tagging your users. If you can describe your users, that actually provides you a mechanism to define policy in a very scalable manner, which is the next bullet. And I'll dive into this in subsequent slides, but orchestrating policies at scale and managing conflicts in policies at scale can become a challenge for those reasons I mentioned in the prior slide. And you want to be able to modify policies easily as well. Things are going to change. You don't want to have a house of cards where you're afraid to pull one card out and the tower comes crashing down. And lastly, and probably most importantly, you need to be able to prove to your legal and compliance teams you're actually doing things correctly. You can't expect them to go and look at your SQL code and say, yep, this looks good. You need to be able to abstract what you've done from a policy perspective and let them understand that and build compliance reports about that. So that's really the management side of things. And then the other side is the enforcement challenges. So this is, what can your database actually do? And I would argue all databases can do table-level controls. If they can't, you probably shouldn't be using that database. But then you get down to row, column, and cell-level masking. There's a gap there where not every single database can do these kinds of things. So these two challenges is what the data platform teams are faced. And so what we're here to talk about today, Jonathan and I, is how Immuta combined with Databricks helps you solve these two challenges. So Immuta is focused on these management challenges, and Databricks now solves these enforcement challenges. So at this point, I'm going to call Jonathan up here to talk about the Databricks Unity Catalog and the enforcement challenges. Go ahead. I can just stand over here.
You're going to hang out? You're going to hang out and look good?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that, Steve. All right. Just recap, Jonathan Keller from the Databricks product team. I lead the Unity Catalog and Databricks SQL portions of the portfolio. If you haven't heard about Unity Catalog, you probably weren't paying attention this week because it was one of the big keynote announcements. And this is really our strategy to provide that foundational layer for governance for all data and AI assets within Unity Catalog. We're really focused on just providing that unified consistency, and it's very hard today to manage row and column and cell level security over things like files, tables, structured, unstructured data, and Unity Catalog is part of that strategy for Databricks, and then of course integrating it across the modern data stack, whether that's on data ingestion, BI tooling, or security and governance tools like Immuta. So what is in Unity Catalog? It's a lot of very cool capabilities. One, of course, is the standardized and fine-grained governance and controls. This is like standard SQL ANSI-based grants for files, tables, and other objects are coming soon. So ML models, notebooks, and dashboards are all lined up over the next few months as well as additional objects that can be governed with Unity Catalog. We're bringing in the standard search discovery experience, really just aimed at productivity and helping analysts as find and discover data within the Databricks experience. Unity Catalog is also the foundation for Delta Sharing, which is our solution for securely sharing live data across organizations. It is also the platform underneath the Databricks Marketplace and the Databricks Clean Rooms that were also announced this week. And so sort of this foundational layer built on top of Unity. And other capabilities on Lineage, I'll double click on in just a second. One of the cool capabilities, then of course, audit logs, system tables, all the things that make expressions of policy by Immuta translate into the enforcement layer and provide the auditing and consistency of results across platforms, cluster types, languages, et cetera. With Databricks, there's a couple changes you should understand with Unity Catalog. If you're familiar with Databricks today, the users, groups, clusters, all the data is really tied within the workspace. And it's even hard to share data across workspaces. Metadata is tied in. It requires an external HMS. You have inconsistencies with how you access your data on cloud storage. Some people you're using permissions defined on the S3 layer versus or the Azure Data Lake layer versus in the Databricks itself. And it can be kind of complicated. So Unity Catalog is really evolving the Databricks ecosystem in a couple ways to make governance and enforcement a lot simpler. The first, of course, is that we're introducing the account console, and this pulls up users and groups all up to the account-wide level, so you can federate your identities from like AAD or Okta or whatever you happen to be using into Databricks once, and have that same set of users, groups, and identities be consistently available across all the workspaces. Unity then centralizes all the governance and data access. So you really get to this, define your data once, define your users once, define your governance once, and have it consistently enforced across all of your workspaces. And so that you can really have a consistency of policy today. Today, for example, you can have a situation where you have one set of data appearing in multiple workspaces with different permissions, making those auditing and enforcement challenges very difficult. And Unity really evolves the platform to make that a lot simpler for that side of things. Related to this is we're changing how we access storage and really secure things. And so today I mentioned there's kind of this mix of how you access storage today with Unity Catalog. Without Unity Catalog. With Unity Catalog, we're introducing the standard set of credentials for accessing data, whether that's files, external tables, or Delta or Parquet tables sitting in the object storage layer. So you're defining service principals that can be used at whatever granularity. And then access control is moved entirely into Unity Catalog. So it gets you out of this sort of multi-master world of having permissions in an object store, permissions in Databricks, and having the possibility for leaking data inconsistently across those two. And so Unity provides this central access control, enforcement, and auditing point for all the data types. And as I mentioned, we'll be adding ML models, UDFs, things like that, notebooks, dashboards, et cetera, as enforceable objects very soon within Unity Catalog. One of the cool capabilities here that you also get with this that plays in is the data lineage capability. This is probably one of the ones I'm most excited about from a perspective, because we didn't stop with tables and column level lineage. We went all the way to notebooks, dashboards, and workflows, and we work across any language. So when you think about with lineage, it enables all kinds of governance workflows. Of course, you can answer questions like, who made a copy of my PII data? Who made a copy of my revenue data? What did they do with it? And it really enables that kind of governance platform where you can say, who has access? Did they access? And what did they do with that access? And now you can answer all those questions with Unity Catalog. But it also gets into data quality and data observability type scenarios where you can see like, hey, if I'm looking at a dashboard, can I trust it? and we can tell you that answer because this dashboard depends on these tables. These tables were generated by these jobs, and the job failed yesterday. So maybe you should get on that before the CEO makes a decision about something that he sees in a dashboard. Similarly, schema evolution. If you're going to delete or change or add a column, the lineage capability will have the ability to know who's using that column and how they're using it, and who you should talk to before you break things. And then it obviously integrates with partners as well and provides those opportunities to simplify data and control workflows as well at a partner level. As far as Unity Catalog and Immuta goes, it's really just a better together story, both on the tech, separating the management and enforcement side, as well as on the go-to-market side, because these work really well together. When I think about Unity, as you mentioned, provides like this foundational layer. Gone are the days of trying to figure out, will the enforcement work in this cluster type and not that cluster type? You get that consistency across all the models with Unity Catalog. Support for all the languages, all of the APIs, and then this new infrastructure like the lineage, the audit logging, the system tables, that all makes it much easier for Immuta to provide that consistency and better experience. And then it allows them to focus on what they do best, which is that management, the intent-based policy, scalable policy orchestration, intent-based policies, things that bluntly Unity is not ever going to do. That's not really our focus. We're just trying to make sure we have that really solid and effective and high-performance governance platform, and so they'll work well together. And they've been helping us a lot on the design of Unity and some of the future-looking capabilities as well. Speaking of what's coming next with us that's really relevant to Immuta's story is row and column-based controls for us. So we're adding in these capabilities coming very soon, which is the ability to define user-defined functions. Today we support SQL. We're adding Python support. External functions are coming on the roadmap as well. And this gives you this ability to write really powerful row and column level masking or row level filtering logic. Have them tested and evaluated as functions so they're easy to manage and easy to develop, and then apply to tables and guarantee that security at the row, column, and cell level consistently across. And so we've really appreciated all the work that Immuta's been doing to help us with the definition of these APIs and roadmaps so that the products will work well together as these capabilities come online. Similarly, same story with attribute-based access control. Unity Catalog will be shortly adding the ability to tag rows and column securities. You can imagine how this all works together. If I've tagged a column as PII, I can use the lineage capability to see if anyone made a copy of PII data downstream, have consistent enforcement across. And we're partnering with Immuta and other partners to make sure that as we evolve over time and these capabilities light up within Unity Catalog, that Immuta will take advantage of them and just get better and better with enforcement over time on the platform. And so I think Steve's going to take off and tell you how he's going to make it actually happen.
Thank you very much. All right, so I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the talk how Immuta is able to do attribute-based access control, which really gives us a lot of scalability. So as Jonathan mentioned, these functions are on the Databricks roadmap. We're working closely with them. This is kind of to give you an idea of how this will work when we pull these two together for at least the masking and row-level security, where Immuta is able to dynamically inject user attributes at runtime without having to read all this SQL. Essentially what this is doing is saying, hey, if the user has country Japan and country US, they get to see the social security number in the clear, otherwise they get a masked version of it. And so the beauty in this is that we're joining these user attributes at runtime rather than having to pre-compute roles in like a role-based model. So I'm going to dive deeper into this, but we kind of wanted to give you guys a little preview of what this means under the covers in the code. All right, so I'm going to jump into higher level details about this ABAC stuff and other things that I briefly mentioned in the beginning. So I like this slide a lot because it covers kind of the functions that you need to do to solve the management challenges, but as well the path that your different personas in your organization benefit from it. So obviously, the discover piece, we need to centralize all that metadata. And again, I want to emphasize that it's not just the data metadata, but also the user metadata, which is critical for building scalable policies. So we'll go out, search around your data. We'll say, hey, look, this looks like a credit card number. This looks like a person name, and tag it as such. And then, again, we can do that with the users. And this helps with the policy building, which is that next bullet, which you can build these proactive attribute-based access control models, which lets you orchestrate these very easily in a future-proof way. I'll talk more about that in a second. And then equally important is be able to monitor everything that's going on, understand what's going on, and prove compliance to your legal compliance team. So if we look at these personas, we've got our data engineers who now have to do all of this manually, and it's painful, it's burdensome. They can't really automate things. And when you get this access control framework and solve these management problems, they can do things in a much more automated way and faster. And then, of course, your data consumers are the real winners here. They get more access more quickly. And you might be thinking, well, if you're giving them more access control, how are the analysts actually getting more access? And I think of this as like trying to cut a pizza with a snow shovel, right? If you don't have the granularity you need, then you can't give people the access at the lowest level that they need. So this gets you, the little pizza cutter instead, so you can actually give everyone the slice that they need, and they can get it more quickly. And then, of course, your legal teams are happy because they can actually understand what's going on and prove that you are doing things in a compliant way, where there's basically zero proof, and there's just a lot of trust involved, implicit trust involved. Okay, so just diving a little bit more into Discover. So, of course, we need to understand all the tables and columns and column types that exist in your ecosystem, as well as all your users as they come on board or they drop off the platform. And then once we understand all of that, then we can discover and tag them with information. So I briefly already mentioned this. We can search through your data and say, and tag it with what is sensitive. But we take that a step further, and we also tag it contextually. So, for example, if we find a person name, we can say this is also PII. And those contextual tags can also be used for building policy and driving where policy gets applied. And then if you're using other catalog tools like an Elation or a Calibra, for example, and you've put all this effort into adding metadata to Calibra, for example, we could suck that information in and augment our tags with those tags so that you can combine those two for policy building. And then again, I keep harping on this user thing. We can also decorate the users with additional metadata. So it's not just the groups and roles that you have in your identity manager like LDAP or Active Directory or Okta, but we can reach across your organization and pull in attributes from other systems like what training courses someone might have taken, for example. And that information is critical, again, for building these policies. So this is the policy authoring piece. I'm going to do a demo at the end here that will dive deeper into this, what this policy is actually doing that I'm displaying on the left here. But again, very easy to build these policies. You build them in an attribute-based way where we're actually decoupling the logic of the policy from the definition of the user, which is the inverse of how role-based access control works, where you basically have to upfront define every combination a combination of access that you have as a role and add users to that role. I'll dive into this in the next slide a little bit more. But you can see this is written in plain English, so it's very easy for anyone to understand, and there's far fewer of them. So this makes it so that your policy and compliance teams can come in and understand what's happening and also build reports off of these. We also have an as code capability where you can define your policy in declarative files and source control those files, and then push that state to Immuta, and Immuta will represent that state and push that state down into Databricks to enforce policy. So this is what I was alluding to. So I like using an analogy because I think this is really a confusing topic. And my dumb analogy is role-based access control is like email distros. So everyone's ever sent an email has probably used an email distro. You probably have lots of email distros in your company. You're never quite sure which to use, right? Because if you want to send a specific email to people that are located in the Boston office that are engineers, like, is there a distro that already exists that contains all those people? Maybe. Do you even know what it's called? I don't know. And if you don't, then you have to either create a new distro that's that exact subset that you need to send that email to, or you manually add all those email addresses on the to line, right? So this is a perfect analogy to role-based access control. You either have the perfect role already established, or you need to create a new one that's the right combination for access. What if instead you could send the email and just say, I want this to go to everyone that is tagged location Boston and is tagged role engineer. Now all of a sudden the email just figures out at runtime all the correct emails to send that to, right? That is what ABAC is. It's dynamic runtime enforcement of policies. And that's why we want to separate the user metadata from the policy logic. So this is an actual study that GigaOM did where it compared role-based access control to attribute-based access control. And specifically, Immuta was the attribute-based access control system, and Ranger was the role-based system. And you can see there was 10 policy scenarios, and it took Ranger 603 roles and policies to 8 with Immuta to do the same job. So that's the power of ABAC. And then Jonathan mentioned lineage. So we're excited about lineage because we can put lineage to work, right? This is, again, giving you more scalability, giving you that manageability, where we can propagate those tags that we discover down to downstream tables as they get created. And this allows us to accurately apply policy, but it also reduces the amount of compute we need to do because we don't need to run that sensitive data detection on those downstream tables because we can rely on the lineage from the upstream tables that created them. And this also allows you to have to do less manual validation that we did the sensitive data discovery correctly. So we're really excited about the lineage feature in Unity. And then lastly, I've probably beat this horse enough, but just being able to monitor everything that's going on so you can build reports, understand who's querying what policy was enforced, and feel comfortable that everything's working correctly and you can understand your policy stance at a glance. All right, so how does Immuta actually work? This is admittedly a very high-level diagram. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper in a few slides, but you author these policies in Immuta. Again, Immuta is just a bunch of logic and metadata. There's no actual data in Immuta, right? And then we push that policy down into Databricks, and then the customer queries tables and only sees what they're allowed to see, right? And then, of course, we capture the audit logs around this. So before Unity exists, we had to do these tricks to make enforcement work, right? Because we have the management problem and the enforcement problem that I showed you in the first slide. We had to solve both of those because Databricks didn't have the primitives we needed to do this. So now with Unity, this is a great thing, right? Like Jonathan said, we don't have to now worry about runtimes, and like it kind of works. It works differently in Databricks SQL versus Databricks interactive clusters. All those problems go away because Unity's here as our enforcement engine. So this is how we solve it without Unity. We have a plugin that runs on interactive clusters, and at runtime, it will rewrite the query and enforce policy. And in Databricks SQL, we have views, and those views join that user attribution at runtime to make those decisions. It's a one-to-one relationship between the view and the table. And so these are different experiences, right? In Databricks interactive clusters, you're querying the raw table. In Databricks SQL, you have to query these views. So it's not the greatest experience from that perspective. But with the Unity integration, now what we're doing is everything is enforced through the Unity catalog native controls, right? So it's the exact same experience on the interactive clusters as it is on Databricks SQL. And as I showed in that little pseudocode snippet a few slides ago, we're joining that user metadata at runtime to make these runtime decisions and give you that scalability from attribute-based access control. All right, so now I'm going to do something crazy and actually do a demo of this live through my phone Wi-Fi hotspot. So we'll see what happens. So this is not a video. All right, so I've got these two tables here. We've also got a few users in here. So I'm running this. I'm Eric right now. I'm going to create policies with Eric, and we've got Josh and Katie as well. And Josh and Katie both have this analyst group that they belong to, and I'm going to talk about these attributes in a second. So this first scenario I'm going to give you is I'm going to do a basic table grant. Everyone's going to be like, big deal, Steve. That's easy. And then I'm going to get a little bit more complicated. We're going to show what distributed stewardship looks like and how we can manage complex conflicts when people are building policies against one another. So let me do this basic policy first. And just to show you real quick, I'm going to run a show grant statement on this table to just show that Katie and Josh are not yet subscribed to it. And while this is running, I can also pull up Katie's screen. So I have Katie and Josh logged in over here. I can just refresh this, and you can see they don't see any tables right now. We'll come back to that. Oh, look, looks like it just finished. There it is. So you can see Katie and Josh aren't there. All right, so now I'm going to build a policy. So again, this is the basic policy. I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it all analysts. And we're going to say, allow users with this group analysts to be subscribed to the tables. And I'm going to click this data source discovery thing. I'll come back to explain what that is in a second. And then we also allow a decision on if I want this to be a required policy or shared policy. I'm just going to say I'm going to allow other people to take responsibility for this table in addition to me. And then I'm going to make this pretty simple and just apply it on all data sources. So this is going to apply to 2 out of my 2 data sources. I only have 2 in here. And we're going to go ahead and create this policy. And so what happens at this point is it's going to add, once this refreshes, it's going to add Katie and Josh to that table. And similarly, if we rerun this grant, show grants in Unity, you'll see that they're there now. And if I refresh, Katie's screen here, she'll see the tables. Okay, so that's the basic one. So let's get a little more complicated. So let's say we've got another user that's really worried. I know I'm doing this as Eric, but pretend it's another user, and they're really worried about people looking at tables with credit cards in them. So they're going to build a completely separate policy, and they can build this policy in a vacuum, and Immuta will make the right decision so that even though there's a conflict on that credit card transactions table, we'll merge that policy correctly. So I'm going to go in here, and we're going to build a new one. We're going to say, I'm just going to call this CC for credit card, and we're going to say, if user possesses attribute training completed data protection. So again, we pulled metadata from some training system, and right now the only person that's taking this training is Josh. And I'm really worried about this, so I always want this policy to be required. And I'm going to apply this on data sources with columns tagged credit card number. So again, anything with this discovered entity credit card number is something we discovered in Immuta. I want to point out, at no point did I ever say this is being applied to a Databricks table, right? This is all hitting the semantic tag layer. So like if you had Starburst too, this policy would apply in both places without you having to specify that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit activate. Okay, so now we have 2 policies, and they're in conflict with one another, right? They both hit this credit card transactions table. So if we look at the members tab, you'll notice Katie went away because she doesn't have that training. And if we look at the policy, you can see we merged them together. We merged the training completed data protection and the is in group analyst. This would have been an or if both people clicked that share responsibility radio button, but it's an and because I required this one, right? And so, of course, Katie can't. If I refresh this, Katie's not going to see the Immuta credit card transactions anymore. All right, so now let's say I actually want to alter this policy, and I'm like, you know what? Some people might not have data protection training, but I still want to let them in, as long as there's some sort of approval process. So I'm going to edit this policy, and I'm going to say, I'm going to click this box, and this means that I'm going to allow a manual override if I'm okay with someone getting access even if they haven't taken this training. And we automatically turn on this data source discovery because otherwise the person wouldn't be able to see it. And actually, before I save this, I'm going to go back to Katie here and refresh this. So she's in Immuta here. She can only see that HR data table because she doesn't have access to that credit card transactions table anymore. So our UI reflects the policies as well, and that's what this discoverable thing's going to do. It's going to make it visible to her. So I'm going to go ahead, make sure I got everything right. Save this. Okay, so now that policy is altered, and if I come back here to Katie, she should see that table now. So there it is, but she's not subscribed, as you can see, so she hits get access, and she's going to get in this pending state that an owner needs to approve her. So I can go back to me, because I'm the owner, I'm Eric, I should say, and you can see Katie requested access. I can go and approve this, and now I've successfully overridden that policy. And if we go and look at the table now, we can see that Katie's a member. And if we refresh her screen, she's going to see that credit card transactions table again. Okay, so complex scenario, multiple data stewards, policies in conflict, everything got merged. We could do a manual override. That was kind of fancy. So let's now go to do a row level security policy. And again, I'm gonna show you this in an interactive cluster, but it will be the exact same experience for an end user querying in Databricks Interactive or Databricks SQL with the Unity integration, right? And so right now, Katie can see all transaction countries, and similarly can Josh. And I know we're getting up on time here, but this is gonna be quick. So what I'm gonna do is build this row level policy, and this is gonna demonstrate the power of ABAC. So if we go to admin, Josh has US as his country, and Katie has US and Japan. So I come in here, I'm gonna build a new data policy, and this is gonna be hide countries, and we're gonna say only show rows where user possesses an attribute country that matches the value in the column tag discovered any location. So what the hell does this mean? This is, I'm taking the user country and I'm dynamically grabbing their countries and comparing that to the location, the column that's tagged location. Notice I did not enter the physical column. If you were doing this with a role-based model, you would have to create a role for every single unique country combination. This could be hundreds or thousands of roles potentially. And you would have to apply it to every single table granularly. In this case, we're just calling out that tag, and it's going to figure out where to apply this. So with what could take literally hundreds or thousands of policies, we can do with one policy. And this is very easy to understand. Your legal compliance person can look at this, read this, understand what's happening. And as I mentioned, this is going to apply everywhere that location tag is, which is 1 out of 2 of my data sources. So now that's turned on. And if I come back here to Katie, remember she's US, Japan, I think. So she's going to only see US and Japan data now. Didn't change the query. It all happened under the covers. Again, this is how it's going to work with the Unity catalog, row level policies, and that little snippet I showed you a second ago. And then Josh, who is only US, only sees the US data. So we got through that on my phone Wi-Fi. I will open it up to questions to both of us. I think that was the end. I have a slide. Oh, real quick too. So our teams here, we're giving away a lake house trip. So if you stick around through the end of the question session, then I think Kaylee's going to come up here and do that, or I'm not sure who's coming up here to do that. And we also have a booth at 727 in the show floor if you want to swing by. But anyway, questions? Yes, Mitch.
So Unity Catalog is also putting entitlements on unstructured data and notebooks and other assets. Do you intend to use the tagging that they're putting onto it to be able to enforce that as well?
That's a great question, to be determined. I'm not sure we're going to go there yet because we don't do non-data stuff, well, at least the notebook stuff. But yeah, maybe the unstructured stuff could potentially make a lot of sense.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We got time for maybe 1 or 2 more.
Is the integration available now, or this is more the future?
Yeah, so what I showed you, so to be clear, let me go back to this. This is available today, but we also support this in a Unity world with the table grants. This will happen once the Unity catalog row and column controls are there. So we're kind of like halfway to this, I would say. But what I just showed you was this essentially. Yeah, so you can turn on Immuta with Unity Catalog with our latest release, and everything will work like with Immuta like it always has. The only difference is once we migrate to this world where Unity's doing all the enforcement, it's just you're not gonna need our plugin anymore, essentially.